Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, where you can awaken your mind to clarity and success even in today's life challenges. We're here to provide insights and solutions that will help you live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hello, everybody. This is Joanne Victoria with another amazing episode of the Sanity Project podcast. You are here to discover a life of clarity, confidence, sanity, and entrepreneurial success. And you're going to do it by paying attention to Palena Neale. Palena, P-A-L-E-N-A, N-E-A-L-E. Palena is a highly experienced leadership coach and educator. She has designed and delivered leadership programs across 4 continents and founded Unabridged. Unabridged is her website, Unabridged Leadership. That's what it is. Unabridged Leadership is a place for you to find out information about leadership development practice, providing bespoke coaching. And if people who don't know what bespoke is, it means just for you, and mentoring and learning for greater personal, professional, and social impact. She runs leadership and coaching programs for women and hosts a women's leadership workshop series. Palena lectures on MBA programs and delivers training for UN leaders as well as corporate clients. Palena holds a PhD in gender and international relations and is a regular contributor of Forbes, Psychology Today, and Harvard Business Review. My goodness, you are busy, young lady.
Well, I am busy, and I'm not so sure that the young applies anymore. But thank you.
Well, you look fine to me, so, what do I know?
Well, I'm going to say I'm preserving well, hopefully like a wine.
There you go. And you can't put, they charge hundreds of thousands of dollars for some fine wine, don't they?
They do.
They certainly do. So let's talk about the importance of building a community.
Oh, great. Absolutely. Well, so first of all, Joanne, thank you for having me on your podcast. And I also want to say a big thank you for all of the work that you do to create community and provide resources for people so that they can learn and grow. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yes, it's something I've always wanted to do. And I have found that podcasts are a way of doing it.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about a theme that's really important for me personally and professionally. And maybe if I could just give a little bit of context as to why I think it's so important.
Absolutely.
And again, thank you for that beautiful introduction. That was very lovely. I actually grew up in a family that had, very modest means. We didn't have a lot of money. My parents didn't have connections. In fact, I was actually the first person to go to university in our family. And so I learned at a very young age that if I wanted things to change and I wanted to, improve, quote unquote, my lot in life, I had to find opportunities. And so finding opportunities often meant reaching out. Even something like going to university wasn't a given, that my parents couldn't afford it. So I had to start looking for jobs, looking for opportunities, meeting people, all as part of trying to get resources to help me achieve what I wanted to achieve. So this whole idea of reaching out was something that I actually started to do from a very young age. And it actually became, for me, one of my critical success strategies. Now, this was a form of networking. I certainly didn't call it that, and I didn't think about it like that, but this was something that I used very actively to make things happen in my life. It was kind of a necessity, and then, no pun intended, but it was actually the price of admission for actually being able to get an education. this idea of reaching out. And the other piece I want to add, because I think it's important to share this as well, is that I always have been, and I still am, a confirmed introvert. So reaching out and asking for things and building connection was not something that felt comfortable. It was certainly something that didn't come natural. And I constantly felt that I was living outside my comfort zone. I wasn't stepping outside. I felt like I was living outside of it. Yeah. So, I mentioned that to just really highlight that this is something that I learned personally and sometimes the hard way. Yet I saw the value, and I continue to see the value in this. And so that's more of my story. And then what was interesting for me is when I started my coaching practice, I started, I was coaching, I still coach men and women, but I was coaching women. And one of the themes that kept coming up was, women would come to coaching because they were stuck at a certain place or position or level in their job. And there was a familiar story coming up, and it was often some version of this, my male colleague who's younger than me, less experienced than me, just got the promotion that we had both been going for, and he got it. And, clearly this evoked a lot of frustration, anger, disappointment, and really this idea of injustice as well. And so when we started to explore this in the context of coaching, and we started to explore a little bit their visibility in networks, there was a very, very, first of all, after the blank stare, what are you talking about? Oftentimes there was a very strong negative reaction. And certainly in the beginning, again, going back some time, in the beginning, I was a little bit surprised by this because that had been one of my go-to strategies to advance. So again, when we started to unpack this a little bit more, there were a number of things going on. And by all means, this isn't applicable to everyone. I'm giving you some generalities here, but there was certainly this idea, and I think of it as a limiting belief or a myth, whatever you want to call it, is that my work should speak for itself. And, this can be a very dangerous myth to buy into because it influences how you show up and actually behaviorally what you do or don't do. And in addition to that, what also was coming up, and it often happened in combination, is that there was some very negative associations about networking. And I'm sure this isn't going to be a surprise to you if I ask someone or a group of people what they think of when they heard the term networking. The range of words that I get, 99% of them are negative, everything from sleazy to transactional to used car salesman, etc. So there's this very strong, almost visceral reaction to this idea, the concept. So what I thought is that, this is great information to have. And for me, it represented, the creation of a whole program of work, because there was clearly some work to do around the importance of networking for, your career advancement in general. And then when you want to transition into leadership in particular, networking and building relationship is a part of your responsibility as a leader. So, that really highlighted that there was a lot of work that needed to be done around this kind of education piece, and also starting to reimagine what networking can look like. So that's, maybe that's a little bit of a more detail than you wanted, but that's a little bit of the backdrop to, I guess, outlining, what we can do, or some of the things that we can do, for example, to start reimagining networking. And I like to always start that process by looking at the benefits. And I think sometimes people aren't clear about what some of the benefits are. So if, for example, I also want to say not only are they not clear about what the benefits are, is that oftentimes we're not clear about how it's actually based on this principle of reciprocity. You're not just taking, you're also giving, or there's an opportunity to give back. And I think that's an important piece that's often missing when we think about networking in its quote unquote traditional form. So, for example, if we think about building connection and reaching out, one of the advantages that most people are aware of is it helps you advance in your career. But what people may be less familiar with is that the more you advance, the more you can help others advance. So you're actually creating not only, you're facilitating your own advancement and taking responsibility, but then you create more development opportunities for others. You can also, for example, you can mentor someone, you can be an ally. So we're expanding the pie.
Yeah, I think I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm just thinking, you're talking about networking and its negatives, but it has maybe the equal amount of positives. Would you say?
Oh, absolutely. So that's what's so important is, okay, you can advance your career, again, yours and others. You can also accomplish more and contribute more. And that's really what's, for many, many people, is so important, this sense of contributing in a meaningful way. And, the wider the range of people and partners and ideas that you have, the better. So again, that's another opportunity. When you network, you have an opportunity to not only access support for yourself and your team or your organization, but you also have an opportunity to give support. And that's where you can help others. And most people do appreciate being able to assist others in some way. So there's that, very much this idea of reciprocity. Another important benefit is, advancing learning and growth, once again, for yourself and others. Not only do you have, by meeting new people and having a bigger circle, you have a much wider exposure to different ideas and opinions. So you're really cultivating, your growth mindset, and again, facilitating this for everyone in your team. We also know how important networking or connection is for also innovation and creativity, and making sure you have that cognitive diversity, which we know is so important and in terms of driving innovation. And then I always like to think about this, and I think, we talked about this a little bit earlier before we came on air, is this idea of amplifying your voice. And, who better than to speak to this than you? But, when you are networking, you're sharing your voice, and so that in itself is very energizing and arguably meaningful, but it also creates this sense of belonging. So, a lot of the work that you do is around creating this community or a tribe where people feel that they belong.
Yes, I try to make that happen. And when I look at networking in the old days being before COVID, and because COVID took a lot out of the working systems that existed at that time, it's been through 3 years. It seems like 30. And it does. It just seems like a long, long time that, COVID interfered with group thinks, because I don't think you can do a networking thing on Zoom. I think you've got to be real and live and in person. And that's the problem. So I think once you create that opportunity for people to gather together to, even to take your team, as you said, to take your own team to this networking event and, have a goal, you want to get something done, and you do that. But if you want to advance and connect with a bunch of other people, you have to know where you're going. Like here in Seattle, I know that they have a special networking group, and I'm sure I'll probably get it wrong as opposed to right the first time, but it's only made up of businesses of a certain, let's say it's made up of businesses of certain sizes. And that makes a huge difference if you're going to a networking meeting, because all of the people are of the same, mantle of income, that kind of thing. And I think that makes a difference as well, because when you have a networking group and everybody's, coming from the street to the top to the president of the organization, you've got too much of a mix, I think, in order to make a networking group work.
Well, I probably want to, I think that if I'm understanding correctly, you're talking about networking events, different kinds of networking events, and you even mentioned groups. And so I think the first thing I would say is what I'm talking about is, I think the term networking, unfortunately, the way it's currently understood is not the best word we have to describe what I'm talking about. But for lack of a better word, networking for me is about building meaningful relationships that are reciprocal and based on generosity. And it's also building relationships that are guided by your values. And so the idea behind this relationship, and I do see them as kind of one relationship at a time, is where you're trying to create more value you're trying to enlarge the pie for everybody, not just yourself. So I think that if you look at networking or building connection like that, then it's less attached to an event and more attached to specific relationships and specific people. And so I think that if we go back and we focus on building relationships, building connection, almost one relationship at a time, that's for me more impactful than, I think many of us, certainly I have. I mean, I came of age, so to speak, in the 90s. So I went to those networking events with my big hair, my big shoulder pads and my red lipstick, and tried to give out as many business cards as I could and meet as many people. And again, those, I think most of us, those are the kinds of associations we have with networking. We also know that those events are really, really not comfortable for most of us. And we also know that they're not particularly effective. So that's absolutely the antithesis of what I'm trying to stress. I'm talking about networking as a way to build this connection. And to build a connection, I do think you have to have it happen one relationship at a time. And the good news is that I think that means there's many, many more opportunities to try and do that.
So are you doing that now?
I myself always do that. I mean, as I mentioned, that was part of the reason I brought up my own personal story, is I've always done that. And I think initially I did it out of necessity, and then I guess became more intentional about it as I grew in my life in every way. And then I think what really, I guess, solidified a lot of my thinking around this is the work that I was doing in my coaching practice, because there were so many objections to networking. And they essentially fall into three main categories. There was a time one, and I'm not suggesting it isn't important, but the time, quote unquote, excuse is usually masking something else. There was another objection, and this is probably the most important one, around mindset. And then the third main objection was around know-how. I don't know what to do, or I don't know what to say. And so, what I found was the most successful in transforming or reimagining some of this was to work on and I know that you already know this in the work that you do, but the first piece is the cognitive piece, reframing or reimagining how we think about networking, and even just like I said, even if we don't think about it as those 90s events anymore and we think about it as meaningful relationships, already there's a cognitive shift. Already.
How so?
Well, if you're not looking at it as going to an event and simply trying to get as many business cards or introduce yourself to as many people as possible without thinking about creating a relationship, there I don't even want to say pitching, because even pitching these days has empathy, as one of its core components. But I would say the networking of the 90s was a kind of almost imposing yourself on someone. And I think now when we want to think about networking or quote unquote do networking, it's about, how can I build a relationship that is going to bring value to both of us? And when I think about it like that, then I don't think about it as what can I get from this person? And I'm only thinking about, the transaction. I'm thinking about, okay, well, what could I bring to this relationship? How might we be able to help each other? So I think that, it's important as part of the work, so to speak, to reframe how you think about networking. And there are, we go through some exercises. I don't think I mentioned it, but I have I've just opened or launched. I was trying to think of the word. I just launched a course on networking to amplify value. So there are things that you can do to help you go through that process. And once you've done that, another thing that you probably want to do, and I know that you mentioned this earlier, is you talked about goals. Well, one of the ways that you can help think about networking in a different way too is to think about it in the context of your larger purpose. So what are you networking for? What's your networking goal? How will it serve your larger purpose? And when you start to think about it also from that aspect, there you start to once again texture in some meaning. So you're not doing it just for the sake of doing it. You're doing it in the service of something. So what I find is that for people who come with very strong objections, we have to work on this part, getting some opening around the concept, thinking about it differently before we can even begin to start talking about strategies, the how-to, so to speak.
I think the first thing I think needs to be done is the word needs to be changed.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's just terrible. I remember when I was in the workforce, looking for clients in that regard, and I would just decide that I would, speak to 3 people, and I figured that would take up the entire hour or whatever that was allocated for this event. And that was easy for me. That was easier than wanting to get, when people go in and, hi, my name is, that's absurd.
Oh,
it's
yes.
just, it's insulting to our intelligence. But if you were,
absolutely,
if one was able to go to an event that was higher end, shall we say, a higher end people, that might help as well. But how do you say, how do you change the word networking? It's implanted in the people's minds, the word networking. And it just, it says so many things that don't apply to you as an individual or people that you spend time with.
Well, I agree. And if it was, I'd love to change it. And that's why too, you'll see, Joanne, and lots of publications like whether, HBR, LinkedIn isn't a publication, but you see a lot of discourse being put out on networking, and they try and change the wording to connection or relationship building. And I do too. I mean, I think that it is very unfortunate. I don't think that so far we're able to change the word. So what you can do, and it goes back to your circles of control and influence, what you can change is how you think about it. So if you know that networking for you is about, building a meaningful relationship where, every time you do that, you're consciously thinking, you're actively listening to the person and you're thinking about what you can can also bring to this relationship, that's something that you can take control over. So you have control over how you think about networking. We can't, unfortunately, at this point, we haven't been able to change the name, but I completely agree. I think it's a horrible term. Actually, it wasn't meant to be a horrible term. Networking originally came from the computing space, and it didn't have the negative connotation. That was something, unfortunately, we, as a society, attached to it.
Yes.
But, getting back to your point, if we don't change that piece first, then nobody is going to take up any possible strategies. So if we talk about events, and I think events, like quote unquote networking events can be very problematic. One of the things that you can do, and you're actually doing this, is you can be, either a speaker or a gatherer. So instead of going to an event, you can go from being a participant to being either a speaker or a host. And that's a way that you can successfully network. So you're gathering people around a theme or an idea, and that might feel much more comfortable for you depending on, your values, your goals, your personality. You can also, for example, run a workshop. Those are some of the things that you can do. And those are also networking opportunities. Again, relationship building opportunities.
Right. So I will, our time is running out, and I will leave you with Palena. I'm going to edit that out. ... Palena Neale and her Unabridged leadership.com. Unabridged leadership.com. And go to her website, because she has lots of things there, including blog posts and so on that talk about, she puts this into words that she writes. I'm losing everything here. What am I doing?
That's okay.
No, it's just something that's happening recently with the heat. That's okay.
Oh, I do hear you there.
Yeah, with the heat. It's just...
Oh, it's terrible.
Okay, I've got to make note of this. Edit. All right. Space. So Palena Neale lectures on MBA programs, and if it can work for some of the people she deals with, it can work for you too. If you want to be in part of the networking field, that's what it's called. And if you want to learn new ways to express yourself via networking, go to unabridgedleadership.com and find things to do, fun to have, and create this opportunity for you to be a leader yourself. Become one, and then you will see how you can create opportunities for others to, build a community.
Thank you. Wonderful.
All right. I want to thank you for being here today. I appreciate your patience, and I think that this is a great idea, and it requires a lot of women with a lot of focus on what they want. Thank you for being here today, Palena Neale, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Joanne.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to AskJoanneVictoria.com to listen to more podcasts. Check out Joanne's coaching programs and get a free copy of her report, 5 Steps to Achieve Life-Work Harmony. That's AskJoanneVictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.